can be confusing to figure out who everybody in real estate. Let's try a microphone. Man, it can be confusing to figure out who everybody in a real estate transaction is, but stick with me. I'm going to tell you who they are and why they're important to you.
You better get fired up.
All right. Today we got the Joe Rosen Show brought to you by microphones, man. You got to use that microphone. All right. So there are a lot of people involved in a real estate transaction. Sometimes it's confusing as to who's who, why are certain people calling you, what are they calling you for, and what's everybody's role in the process. So today I'm going to give you 10 different people in a real estate transaction, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what it is that they do. So number one, obviously I'm going to start with Realtor because that's what I am. The Realtor is kind of I would say this, if you had a circus, right? There's always the guy down there running the circus. He's the main conductor of the circus, right? Or of the choir or of the band or whatever it is, pulling everybody else together to make sure that everything is getting done. So in the beginning, we're very hot and heavy with everything, right? We're showing you homes or we're listing your home. We're working with offers. We're negotiating everything. But once it gets under contract, a lot of other people become a part of the transaction. Our job is to make sure that you're comfortable, you're educated, you're making good decisions, everybody's doing their job, and we're helping you meet the contractual obligations that you've agreed to, right? So that is, in short term, what a realtor is, right? Obviously, there's a lot of things that a realtor does, but typically those are some of the biggest things. So again, negotiating, writing up your contracts, making sure that the legalities that you want in your contracts are there, coordinating with the inspector, making sure the survey gets done, the appraisal gets done, making sure that the lender has everything they need. All parties have the paperwork, the title company's pulling the numbers for you, closing goes well, you get the final walkthrough done. They get a lot of stuff done for you, right? So second person is the transaction coordinator. Now this is kind of like, I don't want to say an assistant because I'm thinking about my transaction coordinator, and honestly, she's better with paperwork and legalities than I am. She's been doing this for like 20, 30 years. She's absolutely incredible. And I always tell clients, her job is from the time it goes under contract until closing, her job is to make sure that all administrative duties get done, right? She wants to keep me in front of people, either helping them write contracts, showing them homes, listing them homes, getting on the phone, trying to sell a home if I've already got your home listed. That's her job, is to take as much of that simple admin off my plate as possible so I can keep doing the toughest part of the job, which is helping people buy and sell homes, right? She's absolutely phenomenal. And you're going to start seeing this person if your realtor has one. Some realtors do, some don't. But they typically pop up once you go under contract, and they're going to send you a lot of administrative information, helpful information. They're going to get you the information to turn on all the utilities as a buyer, or as a seller, they'll remind you to turn off all the utilities. They'll coordinate with title to get you your closing time and date and location, all that stuff. They'll work with you to get over the wiring instructions so you can get your deposit in. They're going to remind everybody of the dates that are included contractually that we have to meet. Transaction coordinator really does a lot. At least for me, they all do different things, varying things, depending upon the agreement that they've got with that real estate agent, brokerage, or team, right? But that's what mine does. She's incredible, man. Shout out to Angie. Number three is your lender. So a lender obviously is the person who gives you the money, or at least that's what we think, right? But there's more to it. I'm actually going to name 3 people involved in lending, but the lender is the person that you see, you meet, you feel, you touch, right? They're the person right in front of you, and they're the one advising you, giving you your options, running numbers for you. When there's some sort of hurdle or issue, they're the one who's going to reach out to you and give you the different options that you have. They're the ones pulling paperwork, verifying, all that good stuff. They're the person, when you think lender, that you're going to think of, right? Now, they've got what I would call an assistant, is a processor, right? And that person, again, once they get the loan agreed upon and there's a contract in place, they're going to take over the processing of that loan to make sure that everything gets done. So sometimes you'll call the lender and they'll say, hey, reach out to my processor. And that's just, again, a person running through the admin portion of it. Now, they generally do specific tasks within lending. Sometimes you're going to have the lender doing everything. Sometimes you're going to have a lender with a processor. It's always different depending upon the lender you're working with. But if you hear processor, in my opinion, all you've got to view it as an extension of your lender, right? And then the third person in lending is your underwriter. The underwriter is the person who's paid a salary. So, and they do that on purpose. The bank does that on purpose because they know that the lender, the one that you're interacting with, they are paid a commission. So they have an intrinsic desire, a motivation to get this property closed, right? Because they're going to make money on it. So they're saying, okay, that's great. We need salespeople, but we want to make sure that somebody is not incentivized by this property closing and is saying, yes, this buyer meets all the objections that we need them to meet. We will give them the loan and they can move forward, right? So that's your underwriter. You'll never meet the underwriter, right? They don't want you to meet the underwriter. And so they're not going to get you in touch with them because they don't want you influencing the underwriter. The lender meets with the underwriter and has those discussions. And a lot of times they'll submit it once they get all the paperwork from you. They'll say, hey, it's been submitted to underwriter for final approval. And that person's going through with a fine-tooth comb and they're saying, hey, does everything look good? Do we need anything in addition? Is there some paperwork that maybe isn't as detailed as we need it to be? Do we need more pay stubs? Do I need something coming from their bank showing this or that? Do I need something to show that a satisfaction of debt has occurred? Anything like that, right? They're going to come up with those final there's a word for it and it's escaping my mind right now, but all the things that need to get done before you can close the loan, right? The underwriter is kind of a pain in the butt sometimes because they come up with all these things, and a lot of times they come up with them 3, 4, 5 days before closing, right? And I will tell you this, most, not all, I love the ones who don't, most underwriters are going to prioritize all their files by when the closing date is, not by when you got it to them. So if you've got a 45, 60-day closing, that's longer than normal, they're not going to start working on your file right away. They're going to wait, right? That frustrates me because a lot of times I'll purposely build in a little bit extra time to make sure we got everything done. And still 2, 3, 4 days before closing, we'll have some sort of request by the underwriter, right? So that's a great question to ask your lenders is, hey, how are your files prioritized? Nobody's going to ask that, but it's something that I want to know when I'm working with a lender because I want to know that it's going to get done and we're not going to have issues at the end. I want my issues up front as quickly as possible so we can get those solutions to them, right? So the next one would be your title closer. So the title closer is the person who is going to be there on closing day to sign all the paperwork with you. Generally speaking, if you got a cash closing, it could be 15, 20 minutes. If you've got something where there is a loan involved, you're going to see maybe 45 to 60 minutes, maybe longer if you got a lot of questions, right? But it's a thick packet that you're going to be signing, and they go through it pretty quickly to get you in and out of there in an hour, right? Roughly. But that person is pulling all the numbers from the lender. They're pulling all the numbers from us. They're pulling all the numbers from the county, the city, the state, whatever, the taxes, everything that's got to be paid both by the seller and the buyer. They're pulling all that together to build your settlement statement, right? So you can see at the end, how much do we owe or how much are we getting? And you can see the breakdown of that on that settlement statement, right? And then again, at closing, they're the ones who are going to finalize all those documents. They're going to bring them into the county. They're going to record them. They're the ones giving you the title policy to ensure that you're covered if there's some sort of title issue. And you really want, in my opinion, as a realtor, but you're going to want this too as a client, I want someone that I got a good relationship with, someone who's going to pick up their phone, answer questions. If we get into a bind, they're a problem solver. They're not just going to send an email and say, hey, figure it out. Let me know when you figure it out. There's a huge difference in quality and value from one title company to another. So that's kind of what I'm looking for when I'm searching for my title companies. But your title closer is one of the most important people in your transaction, right? Next, we've got your insurance agent. Now, this kind of sounds like a duh, but they're helpful in a couple different ways, right? Number one, shop your title insurance agents, because some insurance agents can shop a slew of different options for you, and some work for a very specific company that can only sell that company's specific products. So maybe that product is the best, maybe it's not the best. If you're working with them and them only, you're stuck with whatever they have, whether it's the best or not. If you're working with someone else who can shop many different companies' policies, they're going to go out and find the best policy for your specific situation, your specific home, your specific, everything involved. So I really do think shopping is very important. And when you shop, don't just say, hey, give me the best number, because they will go and find you a Citizens policy that's maybe not the best policy you could get, but they'll have the lowest number. And a lot of people say, great, where do I sign? And then there's an issue and they're frustrated that they've got what I would consider to be crappier insurance, right? So shop the coverage. Say, hey, here's the coverage that company A is giving me. If you give me the same or better coverage, how much would it run? Now it's apples to apples, right? They're going to compete for you and they can see what you've got. I think it's called a declarations page where it's got all the coverages that you've got, right? They'll know what it is. But that person not only will tell you what your insurance is, but if you're really tight on numbers, I like to maintain open communication with them up front because I've got someone right now who is approved for $400,000. But if the insurance is going to be really high, they're not going to be approved. If the insurance is average or below average because maybe they've got a new roof or maybe they've got impact glass or a slew of other things, right? Maybe it's CBS instead of a wood frame house. Now that insurance will come down. So anytime they're interested in a property, I'm going to call them and say, hey, what is the insurance on this property going to be? And then I'm going to know immediately, yeah, that will work with us for our numbers, or no, that's not going to work, right? We need to go look at another property. So that person, if you're really tight on numbers, is someone that you should be talking to before you put in any offer. The next one's the appraiser. Now, this person, again, is going to be hired as a third-party company by the lender, and they're going to charge you for it, buyers. So trust me, it's not free. And they're going to go out and they're going to appraise the property, right? Now, the difference between what I tell you when I come to your home and tell you a value for your property and what an appraiser tells you is the rules involved. I can do anything that I think common sense dictates, right? And the appraiser has certain rules that they have to follow within the appraiser's guidelines. So if you're in Bedford Park HOA, they may be limited to only looking at Bedford Park. If you're out in the sticks, they may be limited to only looking within a mile, right? There's certain rules they have to look at. For us, we don't have those rules, so we can look at a little bit more, right? There's a pro and a con to that. The pro is if you're really good, you can find great comps that the rules for the appraiser would not have found, right? So you can be creative in finding them, and it's very helpful in a lot of situations. The negative is if you've got a newer agent who does not know how to do a great market analysis for you in determining your value, it gives them more opportunities to make mistakes on the value of your property. Maybe you find the identical property to my property, but it's in another HOA. Maybe that HOA sells for 10% less or 10% more on average. Okay, now you're going to think that your property is worth that, but it's not. It's worth roughly 10% more, 10% less, right? So that's what an appraiser does. If the appraisal comes in at price or higher, you're good to go. If it comes in lower, depending upon how the contract's written, there's usually going to be either appraisal contingency or, and there's a lot of asterisks to what I'm about to say, a financing contingency that would protect you as a buyer. And you'd have four options, right? You either have to come down in price, the seller does, to meet that appraisal price, or the buyer has to come up with the cash difference in addition to their closing costs and down payment already that they're paying, or you have to do a variation of the two, right? If it's a $10,000 difference, maybe the seller comes down 5 in price and the buyer comes up with $5,000 in cash, or maybe it's 8 and 2 or 7 and 3 or 6 and 4. It doesn't matter, but some variation of those two things equaling that difference, right? Or the fourth option is buyer gets their escrow deposit back and they move on, right? They cancel the deal. So an appraiser is there as an insurance policy for the bank to say, hey, I know the salesman, the lender wants to get this done. I know the salesman, the realtor wants to get this done. And obviously the buyer's motivated, the seller's motivated, but should we, the bank, be motivated to take on this risk at this price? The appraiser is the person that gets hired to tell the bank, yes, you're comfortable lending at this price. Next, we've got the surveyor. So a surveyor is going to typically go out and take a look at where the lines of your property are. They'll draw you up a survey. It's going to be something that's given to your title company. You can get a copy of it. You should get a copy of it at closing. And typically those are good for 2 years, right? So, and when I say good for, I mean, if you go to sell your property, that can be used again without having to purchase another surveyor, right? So I've seen issues before where you get a survey and you find out that your fence is not on your property, or that nice garage you like is 3 feet over the line, or there's an easement from the county that really hinders the value of the property, or there's a million things I could go through, right? But all types of encroachments and easements and different things like that. I'm not saying move forward with them or don't move forward with them. It's really dependent upon each scenario. But I guess what I'm saying is they help educate you, right? They bring all those things to your awareness. And now you can decide if this is something you want to do or don't want to do. And then the last one that I've got here, the 10th one, is the escrow holder. So you agree, and typically in Florida, although it's negotiable, you're going to agree to give your escrow deposit to an escrow holder, an escrow company, and they're going to put it in an escrow account, and they're going to hold that until closing, right? And if you've got contingencies to back out of the deal, you can back out of the deal. You can get your escrow deposit back as a buyer. If you don't have any contingencies, you can risk losing that deposit. You can honestly risk getting sued for specific performance and having to purchase that property, right? So there's a lot of different things. Now, usually I would say probably 97% of the time, the title company is also going to be the escrow agent, and they're going to be the ones holding the funds for you. But sometimes it's not the title company, it's some other escrow company that is holding the funds. And that's completely okay as long as you're following the guidelines of the agreement that both the buyer and the seller fully executed, right? So there are 10 folks involved in the my gosh, extremely complex real estate transaction. If you've got anybody that I forgot, feel free to put them in the comments. And if you've got any questions, certainly put them in the comments. Also, hey, I'm here every single Monday trying to bring you guys as much value as possible. If there's a topic that I can touch on or a question you'd like answered, put it down in the comments and we will absolutely touch on that in the future. Thanks for joining me and have a phenomenal rest of your Monday.